Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not Nostradamus, I'm not clairvoyant, but almost everything that I've been saying for the past 6 months is taking place. I did tell you years back in 2016 that Clinton would lose to Trump. I was one of the only people, especially on the left, telling you this. Now, I am telling you what I've been telling you for 6 months. I predicted in the Federalist, read my article below, that we will experience a devastating stock market crash. We're seeing that in slow motion. Unfortunately, we will experience the 2,000 to 3,000 to 4,000 point drops in a day or two. I mean, within the span of a day. I don't know when, but almost certainly it's going to happen within the next 7-8 months. The Dow Jones will get to around 20,000. Bitcoin is down $5,000 in 5 days. It'll get to around 10,000. Inflation will continue to skyrocket. And I have been saying, have I not been saying, if you've watched this channel, and I've done so many segments on this channel and the Stock Market Crash channel below, hit subscribe to the Stock Market Crash channel below. Also, if you want to support my work, your Patreon is so important, ladies and gentlemen. It helps me do the things that I do, and I talk about subjects that the mainstream does not talk about or doesn't want to address. Your Patreon support is so important, especially since my analysis has been spot on. I have been telling you that oil is going to go well past all-time highs. It just hit $130. Go to oilprices.com. It's a fantastic website. It is a fantastic, fantastic website. I'm not affiliated with it, but I always watch it. Oilprices.com. Brent crude 130. Now it went down to 129, but it did hit over 130. West Texas Intermediate WTI crude 125.8. We're going to approach close to $200 per barrel oil. A recession is imminent. So I've also been saying we're going to head into a recession, but at least Trump is not tweeting. Oh, and by the way, I told everybody. Did I not tell people? You could check the segments in the past month and a half. Did I not tell people that mashed potato brains, our president, Biden, would get us into a nuclear confrontation? Last week, Russia elevated its defense readiness, its nuclear alert capabilities. Did I not say that something like that would happen? So again, it's not about me being right or me saying, predicting things. It's about at least Trump is not tweeting. Because what have I also been saying? If the ICBMs are flying above, God forbid, and we enter into an economic depression, which is possible, by the way. By the way, I'll have at 11 p.m. every night. I'll have a special series on nuclear annihilation and U.S. economic depression are possible, but at least Trump isn't tweeting. Because that will be part 2 of the installment. Because one of my amazing subscribers said, "Hey, you better start doing that as a series. It's hilarious." And I don't even mean to be funny, but it actually is frightening. But also, in terms of comedy, when you think about the obsession that Democrats and media have had over Trump, how he's undermining democracy and doing Putin's bidding, and installed by the Kremlin, the projection was unbelievable. The antithesis of everything that was said about Trump. I mean, you're seeing the greatest fears of the Trump administration play out and exist during Biden's administration. Mashed potato brains is presiding over an economic, foreign policy, societal collapse. I mean, we're not even talking about crime rising, homelessness rising, wealth inequality exacerbated through, rising oil prices and inflation. Inflation is going through the roof. It's not 7.5%, people. The Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Fed are not telling the truth. Because if inflation, according to Peter Schiff, was calculated in the way that it was in the early 80s, it would be at 15 or 16% inflation. So let's recap all the wonderful things that are taking place, because at least we don't have the orange menace undermining democracy. Inflation through the roof. Like Jimmy Carter is a better president than Biden. The only president worse that I could think of is George W. Bush. George W. Bush, the worst president of all time. Of all time. Biden is a close second. And if you want to hear Herbert Hoover, Jimmy Carter, you can just, But George W. Bush and Biden, and who knows, Biden could possibly surpass George W. Bush as the worst president of all time, who ushered in an era of never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. And we ended his administration with a financial collapse, which we're seeing right now. So you see Biden presiding over exactly what they feared Trump would preside over, except it's happening under Biden. Crimea was taken under President Obama, and all of Ukraine, or most of Ukraine, is now being taken by Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine under Mashed Potato Brain's tenure, during Biden's tenure, for a reason. Okay, we ended economic activity 2 years ago. I said in my Federalist article, once we did that, we opened up a Pandora's box of problems. We are going to see a devastating stock market crash. I predicted that, and it's happening in slow motion. That unfortunately will take place. Look, I don't want even the furthest lefty who might know who I am, who thinks I'm like, a complete buffoon, an imbecile, and all that stuff. I don't want that person to lose money in Bitcoin or in the stock market. If you're like a liberal Democrat and, oh my God, you remember me as the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post, and the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. You could read my writing in The Hill, the Huffington Post, Salon, the Jerusalem Post, the Federalist, the Daily Caller on hagoodman.com, the Times of Israel on hagoodman.com. Read my Federalist article below in the pinned comment. I don't want that person who looks at me and says, oh yeah, you don't want to become H.A. Goodman. He voted for Trump. Even that person, I don't want to lose money. I don't want anyone on the left or the right or any American or anyone in the world to lose money. But this is going to be the greatest loss of wealth since 2008 and possibly more than 2008. I mean, we have a derivatives nightmare that nobody's talking about that I addressed in the Federalist, that you can look. The canary in the coal mine was Archegos, the hedge fund that went under with a $30 to $40 billion margin call. And we don't even know, FINRA and the SEC, they don't know how much debt these banks and hedge funds truly have, because derivatives contracts, they don't disclose the margin that they utilize to purchase the derivatives contracts. That's why nobody knew the 5 or 6 banks. They didn't know how much money would be lost if Archegos went under. They had no clue. They had no clue at all. If Archegos went under, the hedge fund, how many banks were also tied to them. That was a very small hedge fund. They call it a family office. And so they got a $30 billion margin call just because the price of Viacom fell down too sharply. But here you have an economic collapse waiting to take place. We have oil at $130 per barrel. Okay, it's going to go past the all-time highs at 147. Here's the important thing. If you've lasted this long, this is the important financial analysis, okay? We didn't have, in 2014, we didn't have 7.5% inflation or 10% inflation, whatever the true number is, or 15% inflation. We had something like less than 2%, something like that, okay, in 2014. And we didn't have the nightmare we have in terms of margin debt. We still have close to $1 trillion in margin debt. We didn't tank the U.S. economy because wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrats worship and revere the experts that bolster their bias and their political and world viewpoints. Any expert or authority that is a cynic or has a dissenting opinion, those people have been banished, excommunicated. Oh my God, they should never have been born. They shouldn't even exist. And oh my God, they're spreading information that is amiss. That is just a horrible, it's information that's hurting people's lives. Meanwhile, the adults are in the room. The adults are in charge. We have oil at over 130 now. Go check oilprices.com. We have, I didn't get to GDP now. These are all Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Go to the GDP Now estimate. It's 0%. 0% for the first quarter of 2022. So you have oil at $130, 0% GDP estimate, and we didn't have that problem. We didn't have inflation and 0% growth in 2014. So in 2014, when Crimea was taken under President Obama's watch, right, these are the Cold War JFK Democrats who Putin really fears. Oh, he's shivering, he's shaking in his boots. Oh my God. And Trump was installed by the Kremlin, except we didn't have these problems under Trump. We had a great economy, and we had a foreign policy where he was the first president to step foot in North Korea, and President Moon Jae-in of South Korea stated that Trump deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. And we had record low unemployment, record low black and Latino unemployment. We had the Doha Agreement that Biden completely botched, telegraphing to the world how incompetent he is. Those 13 Americans should be alive today. Those over 100 Afghans should be alive today. Biden, mashed potato brains, used the T-ban as the only as security around the only airport he left open. But again, we can go on forever. The point is, mashed potato brains never had a foreign policy decision that ever worked out, ever. He voted alongside the Lincoln Project people and the Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld, as did Kerry and Clinton and all the wonderful morally superior Democrats who care so much about climate change. And oh, by the way, Build Back Better was focused primarily on combating climate change. Now they're releasing strategic oil reserves, and oil is at 130. You're not sanctioning Russia with oil with wind and solar energy, okay? And then Russia hasn't even throttled the tap or reduced supply of oil and gas to Europe. They could easily do that. They're actually going to ban fertilizer exports, which will cause commodities to go even higher. Commodities are at all-time highs. Oil's going to reach all-time highs, like I said it would. Inflation's going to reach all-time highs. We're going to have a stock market crash, unfortunately. And again, I don't say this gleefully. I don't want this to happen, but when Democrats and media pushed, and they utilized the most absurd logic, and we won't get into it. Oh my God, we can't get into it, okay? Because they're so petrified you listen to something different from what they're espousing. But you know what? If we had a free exchange of ideas, none of this would take place. Because ideas, the merits of ideas win out. But if you have a fabricated consensus, and you deem anything Russian propaganda that you disagree with, well, then now we have oil at all-time highs, inflation at all-time highs, 0% GDP growth first quarter, a nuclear confrontation with Russia that's only getting worse. Now they want to sanction Belarus, okay? And if you start doing this, global sanctions versus one country, well, you know what? What if China and Russia and some other countries, Turkey, let's say they try to sanction Western countries with the U.S. This is infinitely worse than what Trump's tariffs were said to have done. Trump leveled tariffs at China for good reason, and he was seen as this authoritarian monster. And that was only a short-term tactic. Okay, to ensure that, you have USMCA, what Trump did was exactly what Biden's trying to do now, because all the liberal, wonderful ideals that he tried to infuse within Build Back Better didn't work out. And Manchin torpedoed the whole thing, so did Sinema. Okay? Now, instead of focusing on climate change, he's opposed to even banning 7% of Russian oil imports we get. You couldn't, look, everything the morally superior liberal Democrats, and I was a liberal Democrat my whole life, everything they touch turns to the fertilizer that's going through the roof now in terms of cost. They said they said WMD existed. They, along with the Bush administration, it didn't. They said Clinton would win in a landslide. Okay, she didn't. They said that Trump was installed by the Kremlin. He wasn't. And anyone who believed that is a complete and utter imbecile. Okay, we're now finding the Durham Probe Special Counsel, watch my segment prior to this one, is peeling open the layers of all of this nonsense. They set up and framed Trump because it's just classic projection. They're guilty. They're the ones who are guilty of everything they accuse Trump of. And now you see Russia taking over Ukraine, unfortunately, and God bless the people of Ukraine. The worst thing to do is be an ally of the United States of America if you don't have nuclear weapons or a major military, because they're stuck in between the West and Russia, and NATO is not doing anything, and they can't, and the U.S. is not doing anything militarily, and it can't, because that would cause a nuclear annihilation, which, by the way, we're getting closer to possibly seeing. I don't think we'll see it, but we're getting closer to it. And where the nuclear confrontation, I think, will also get to a Cuban Missile Crisis scenario. But we're going to have a stock market crash. I predict that. We're seeing it right now, so my prediction is pretty much, we could see what's taking place, so it's pretty accurate. I did say oil will go to record highs and well over $100 a barrel. We're seeing that now. It's at 130 today. Inflation is going way past 7.5%, so that's not that big of a prediction. I did say that we'd have a nuclear confrontation because mashed potato brains would get us into one. I did say that Bitcoin will get to 10,000. Unfortunately, I respect people who invest in Bitcoin. I respect, the philosophy behind it, but it's going to around back to 10,000, and the Dow is going to go back and plummet down to around 20,000. It is going to be an absolute catastrophe. And I don't want anyone to lose money, even the people who don't like me on Twitter or whatever. I don't have Twitter, by the way, and I don't have Facebook. So anybody impersonating me in any forum is committing a crime. Anyway, and I always have the receipts. But anyway, for future litigation, if God forbid that has to happen. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel right now. To my Patreon, thank you. I won't be doing a live stream tonight. I'll probably start back again tomorrow. Hit subscribe to this channel, people. Unfortunately, everything I've been saying is taking place. Be here at 11 p.m. tonight for a really hilarious, not really hilarious series that I have on nuclear annihilation and the economic depression that we might get in.